My name is Claire. I'm 55 now, but this story started 5 years ago when I was 50, living what I thought was a stable, quiet life. We lived in a small, peaceful neighborhood in Oregon. My husband, Tom, was well-liked, the type who mowed his lawn every Saturday morning and waved at every car that passed. We had been married for 26 years. We had one grown son in college. I worked from home as an editor, and Tom worked in construction management. Next door lived a woman named Julia. She moved in with her teenage daughter a few years earlier. We were friendly, not close but polite. We exchanged cookies at Christmas, smiled during trash day. Normal suburban stuff. Tom would sometimes wave at Julia longer than necessary. I teased him about it once. "She's half your age," I said. He laughed. "Don't flatter me." But the joke never quite left me. There were little things I noticed over the years. Strange receipts in his glove box. A second phone once, which he claimed was for work. Weekend emergencies that took him away for hours. But I trusted him. We had history. We had a life. Then, on my 50th birthday, Tom didn't come home. He texted me at 6 p.m. "Running late. Hurry. We'll explain everything tomorrow." No call. No flowers. Just silence. At 11 p.m. I finally walked outside, desperate for fresh air. And that's when I saw it. Tom's truck. Parked in Julia's driveway. Lights off. House dark. But the truck was unmistakable. I walked to the sidewalk. Stood there. Waited. And at midnight he came out the front door. Shirtless. Carrying a baby. Not a teenager. Not Julia. Baby. I didn't say a word. I just turned around, went inside and started packing a bag. Because something told me this wasn't just infidelity. It was something much worse. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the guest bed at my sister's place, eyes wide open, trying to process what I saw. Not just the betrayal, the scale of it. The layers. The audacity. The next morning I went back. Not to him. To her. I knocked on Julia's door at 8:12 a.m. She opened it wearing a robe, hair messy, eyes puffy. She looked surprised. Guilty. Scared. "Can we talk?" Yes. She stepped aside. Inside, the baby was sleeping in a bassinet. The house was quiet. Almost too quiet. I stood in the living room. "How long?" Yes. She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. 4 years, she whispered. Almost 5. I felt something in my chest collapse. "And he's the father." She nodded. I looked at the baby. Peaceful. Innocent. "How many lies?" She hesitated. "A lot. Julia told me they met on a job site. That it was supposed to be nothing. But then she got pregnant. He told her he was separated. Said his wife was cold, distant, not really a marriage anymore." I laughed bitterly. "Wow. The classics." She looked down. "He promised he'd leave you. Said it was just a matter of timing." I nearly left then. But I had one more question. "Did you know we were neighbors when you moved in?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "Yes." I didn't go home. I couldn't. I sat in my car for almost 2 hours outside a coffee shop, wondering what to say. What do you say to a man who built an entire life on top of yours? Noon I drove back. His truck was in our driveway. I walked in through the front door. He was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee. Like it was any other Tuesday. He looked up. "Claire." I didn't speak. Just stared at him. Finally he sighed. "I was going to tell you." "When?" He didn't answer. I sat down. "How many children?" "1. Any others I should know about?" He flinched. "No. Just her. Her name is Julia. Not her. You've been living a lie. For 4 years. Right next door." He rubbed his face. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Tom?" He was quiet. "I kept waiting for the right time," he finally said. "To destroy me." "No. To make it right." I laughed bitterly. "You thought there was a right way to reveal this." "I thought I could manage both." For a while. Then I fell in love with the baby. I couldn't walk away. Felt sick. So you decided to betray one family to build another? He looked at me. I never stopped loving you. That broke me. Understood. You don't get to say that. You don't get to love me and lie to me every day. I'll do anything, he said. Please don't leave. I stared at him. The man I thought I knew. At the stranger across the table. Then I walked upstairs. And I called a divorce lawyer. The papers were signed within a week. Tom didn't fight it. Maybe because he knew he couldn't. Maybe because part of him wanted out. Our son came home from college when he heard. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said, "He's dead to me," and left the room. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the shame. Every neighbor suddenly had something to say. Side glances. Whispers. One even asked, "Did you really not know?" I stopped walking the neighborhood. Then one afternoon I opened the front door to find Julia standing there. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't answer. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was the one being lied to. But he lied to us both. I crossed my arms. "You moved in next door." She nodded. "I thought he'd pick me. Eventually." "Congratulations," I said. "He did." "I don't want him," she whispered. "Not anymore." We stood there for a long moment. Then she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "He told me you were dying." My blood ran cold. "He said you had 2 years left. Cancer. That's why he couldn't leave you yet." I slammed the door. That night, I opened the safe in the closet. And I started writing down every single thing I could remember. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote 3 words at the top. Who else knew? Because this wasn't just about Julia anymore. It was about the cracks in my life I'd ignored. About friends who said too little. About receipts I never questioned. I started small. Emails. Credit card statements. Mileage logs from his work truck. All things he'd never thought I'd look at twice. There were charges for restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels too nice for a simple construction manager. One address kept showing up. Over and over. P.O. Box. I drove there. The clerk asked for ID. Showed mine. She hesitated. "I'm his wife," I said. She gave me a look. Then handed me the box contents. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. From another woman. Not Julia. Her name was Vanessa. She lived in Bend. Town 3 hours away. And she had a son. Named Thomas. My hands shook as I opened the last letter. It was dated only 2 months ago. "Tommy misses you. I told him you're working hard to build us a future. He's so proud. Just like his dad." I sat in my car and screamed. Julia wasn't the only one. She was just the one closest. I drove to Bend the next day. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my sister. I just got in the car and went. I needed to see her face. To know what kind of story Tom had told her. Vanessa lived in a small blue house on a quiet street. There were toys in the yard. Bike on the porch. I rang the bell. She opened the door with a toddler on her hip. She blinked. "Can I help you?" "My name is Claire," I said. "I was married to Tom." I stared. Her mouth opened then closed. "You're his wife." "Was." She stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and diapers. The little boy stared at me with big brown eyes. "I got your letters," I said. Her shoulders dropped. "I had no idea. He said you died in a car crash. Said he was still grieving." I nearly laughed. "He told the last one I had cancer." She looked stunned. "He visited twice a month," she said. "Always brought gifts. Spent the weekend. Said he worked long distance." I nodded slowly. "I loved him," she whispered. "He said we'd be a family soon." I looked around. The baby photos. At the framed picture of Tom holding the boy. "You still want him?" Yes. She shook her head. "I want answers." So did I. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about justice. Vanessa and I talked for 3 hours. She showed me more letters, photos, a bracelet Tom gave her. It matched one I'd seen in Julia's house. He wasn't just repeating mistakes. He was repeating stories. The same lies, gifts, promises. We made a decision. The next weekend, I invited Julia and Vanessa to my sister's house. Neutral ground. No cameras. No drama. Just 3 women with one thing in common. The same man. Julia came reluctantly. Vanessa brought her son. The tension was thick, but there was no yelling. No screaming. Just silence. And then tears. We compared timelines. He told each of us he was with the others for work. We put it all together. 3 calendars. 3 families. And 1 man. When Julia realized Tom had a child with Vanessa, she broke down. He told me he was getting a vasectomy. That he couldn't have more kids. I guess he forgot, I said. By the end we were exhausted. But united. So we planned something together. Something bold. Something he wouldn't expect. Because Tom had lied to 3 women. But now we were done listening. We picked a Friday night. I told Tom I wanted to talk. That maybe, just maybe, we could have one last adult conversation. He agreed, of course. He always did. He showed up at my sister's house dressed in a collared shirt and holding flowers. "You look good," he said. I let him in. In the living room, Julia sat on the couch. Vanessa stood beside the fireplace. His smile froze. "What is this?" "Your audience," I said. He looked from one to the other. Then to me. "You set me up. We gave you a chance to tell the truth," Julia said. "You could have walked away clean," Vanessa added. "But you chose more lies." He sat down slowly. "I can explain." "No," I said. "You can listen." We each took turns. Reading his letters. Quoting his contradictions. Showing his photos. His lies. He tried to interrupt. We didn't let him. After 20 minutes he stood up. "You've made your point." I looked him dead in the eye. "This isn't revenge, Tom. This is exposure." Vanessa handed him a manila envelope. "Custody papers. You'll sign over your rights. You've lost that privilege." Julia held up her phone. "You'll be paying back every cent. And I've already spoken to an attorney." He turned to me. "What do you want?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "I already took everything I needed back." He left without another word. And for the first time in years I felt light. But the story wasn't over. Because a week later, I got a call from a woman I didn't know. And she said, "You don't know me, but I think we share a husband." Her name was Diane. She lived in Sacramento. She said she met Tom 7 years ago at a real estate seminar. She didn't know about me. Or Julia. Or Vanessa. They weren't married. But they had been engaged. He told her he was a widower. They'd split a year ago when she found texts from someone named V. She never knew who it was. Until now. She had photos, voicemails, one where he told her he was committed to their future. She sent them to me. I forwarded them to Vanessa. She sent back, "That's my couch." He'd visited Diane with Vanessa's child. Told her the baby was his nephew. Julia couldn't believe it. "How did he have time?" "Because we gave him time," I said. "All of us." The 4 of us started a group chat. We called it Tom's Survivors Club. We shared everything. Documents, timelines, emotional support, legal strategies. And then, we went public. We wrote an open letter. Each of us signed it. We sent it to our local paper. They published it. Title: "One Man, 4 Lives, and the Women Who Took Theirs Back." It went viral. And Tom, well, he disappeared. No more phone calls. No more lies. But it didn't matter. Because the world finally saw him. And we finally saw ourselves. Not as victims. But as survivors. The article changed everything. Not just for us but for the town. For other women. People started reaching out. Strangers. Neighbors. Even old acquaintances who said, "He tried that with me once." It was like the floodgates opened. Tom's reputation crumbled overnight. He lost his job. The homeowners association banned him from the neighborhood. His truck was vandalized, not by us but someone anonymous. We didn't celebrate. We didn't cheer. We healed. Vanessa started therapy. Julia enrolled in a real estate course. Diane moved to Portland with her son. I took a trip to Ireland. Alone. Just me and a journal. It was there, walking a quiet cliffside in Galway, that I finally stopped asking why. Because closure didn't come from answers. Came from freedom. When I returned, I started writing full-time. About betrayal. About truth. About survival. That book is coming out next spring. Its title, The Women Next Door. And this time, it's my name on the cover. 3 weeks before the book launch, I got an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." It's about Tom. It was from a woman named Melissa. She lived in Colorado. She said she saw the article and recognized Tom's face. Her mother had dated him in the early 90s. Her mother passed away years ago. But Melissa always wondered about her biological father. And now she thought she knew. She attached a photo. A man holding a baby. The man was unmistakably Tom. I showed the photo to Vanessa. "That's him," she said. Julia said nothing. Just closed her eyes. Diane whispered, "How many?" Melissa didn't want money. She didn't want drama. She wanted a name on a birth certificate. And maybe a sister. I offered to meet her. We had lunch in Denver. She looked so much like Mia, Julia's daughter, it shook me. I hugged her goodbye. Back at the hotel, I stared at the mirror for a long time. All this pain. All this loss. And yet somehow it led here. To connection. To truth. To healing. The night of the launch, the bookstore was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, clutching copies of The Women Next Door. There were news crews, bloggers, podcasters, and more women than I could count with tears in their eyes. I stood at the podium. Vanessa beside me. Julia in the front row. Diane filming from the side. Even Melissa had flown in. I looked out at them, these women my sisters in survival. Cleared my throat. "This book isn't about Tom," I said. "It never was. It's about the power of truth. The kind that's buried. The kind we're told to keep quiet. The kind that demands to be heard." The room applauded. When the signing line began, woman after woman thanked me. Not for the story, but for giving them permission to tell their own. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen with a glass of wine. I opened a letter I'd tucked in the back of my journal months ago. And sent. And finished. It was addressed to Tom. I read it. Then I burned it. Because I didn't need closure anymore. I had something better. Future. And for the first time in years it was finally mine.